12:01, 12:02, and we will call to order the June 23rd, 2021 meeting of the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency Board of Directors. With that, let me ask everyone here and online to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Chair West?
Yes.
Director Ramirez? Director Mobley?
Here.
Director Tremblay?
Here.
Tony's muted.
Tony, can you hear us or are you muted?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We cannot hear you, Tony.
Director Tremblay, can you try again?
Can you hear me?
Shake your head.
Okay, I believe we can hear you now.
Okay.
And Director Borchard?
Here.
Okay. With that, we will recess this general session to go into closed session to return at 1:30. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:43. I apologize for the delay returning to general session. The delay is because of some technical difficulties. If you're watching online, you're probably just seeing the GMA signboard and not able to see inside the boardroom or any of the other board members. The board members are here, and we have the facility to go forward with the meeting. Despite the fact that you can't hear us, you should be able to hear us, and we should be able to hear you when the time comes and you raise your hands for any questions and the like. So we will, with the technical limitations we have, we'll proceed with the agenda, and if it becomes too problematic, obviously we'll have to come up with an alternative. But at this point, again, having returned from closed session, can report that no action was taken in closed session that requires reporting in general session. We will proceed then to item D on the regular agenda, the agenda review. Any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Chair.
All right. Next, we'll proceed then with public comments. This is an opportunity for anyone wishing to address the board on matters not otherwise contained in today's agenda to do so. Please raise your hand so the clerk of the board can recognize you. Jamie, any raised hands?
Yes.
Okay.
Chair, we have alternate Perillo.
All right. Bert, can you hear me? There we are. We can see your picture. But
Yes, can you hear me?
now we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to make a comment, a public comment. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, GMA board and public. My name is Bert Perot. I'm a council member for the city of Oxnard. I'm sure that most are aware that last week few stakeholders, there's a tremendous amount of background noise. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay.
The background noise is not here.
Okay, all right. I am sure that most are aware that last week a few stakeholders chose to file a complaint that will force this region into a lengthy and costly adjudication process that most of us have been trying to diligently avoid for decades. This is unfortunate. Many of us have worked extremely hard over the last few years to seek an agreeable and fair resolution that will provide sustainable water resources for our area while allowing our communities to thrive. I believe this recent action will make achieving that goal more difficult. We will spend many millions of dollars and waste many years fighting each other. And all the money, which in Oxnard comes from our ratepayers, will go to attorneys rather than pipelines. In the end, we'll still have to build those pipelines. So this is tremendously disappointing. That said, we cannot waver in our commitment to work together to find common ground and conduct the work that needs to be done on behalf of the residents and business communities we serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bert. Any other public comments?
None seen, Chair.
All right, thank you. Moving on then to board member comments. Let me first ask the members that are here in the boardroom.
No comment.
None, Chair.
Director Ramirez or Director Tremblay, any comments?
We're in a drought. We got to really pay attention to that. That's what I always am going to say every time I have a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving on, oops,
No comments, Mr. Chair.
thank you. Moving on then to the consent agenda, there's only one item, the minutes of the last meeting. Unless someone has a comment or a question, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move for approval.
And a second?
I'll second that.
And I guess we need a roll call because we have some members online.
Chair West,
Yes.
Director Ramirez.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Director Mobley,
Yes.
Director Tremblay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Director
you.
Borchard.
Yes.
All right, moving on then to item number 6, an update on the development of replenishment fee.
Good afternoon, Board. Jason Kander with the County Counsel's Office for the record. And I will be presenting on the replenishment fee. Just to clarify at the outset here, the fee that we're talking about at this particular item is a fee for the purchase of surface water supplies to be delivered or imported into the OPV basin, and not any other fee for which we have had discussions about projects over the last 6 months, for example. The current fee, just to be absolutely clear, is specific to the OPV basins, and it is for the generation of funds for the purchase of state water project funds or state water project water to be imported into the OPV basin. With respect to the status and the schedule that we're currently on, as you'll recall, the agency entered into a contract with Jarvis, Fay, and Gibson, a law firm in the Oakland area, for assistance preparing a fee study with respect to this particular replenishment fee. Specifically, the scope of work for Jarvis and Fay was added to its original contract in January of this past year. And again, it focused on generating funds for the purchase of water to be imported into the OPV basin. The idea of purchasing water was selected as our primary goal at this particular point, given the fact that it is one of the more quickly implementable projects as opposed to some of the larger capital projects that we're talking about and discussing to be implemented in both basins. Back at the beginning of this year, after executing the contract with Jarvis and Fay, or Jarvis Fay, the goal in terms of schedule for the implementation and adoption of this fee was to have a fee in place for the beginning of the agency's next water year. So the goal was to have it be in effect as of October 1 this year. Over the past 4 to 5 months, staff has made significant progress in coordinating activities with stakeholders. In particular, staff has worked closely with United. Staff has worked closely with United on their development of a technical memo on the availability of state water project water and the cost of importing it into the OPV basins. At the same time, Jarvis Fay has prepared an outline, and staff has worked diligently over the last couple months with its consultant, Dudek, to identify those materials that will be relied on and incorporated into any fee study prepared by Jarvis and Fay. over the last 4 or 5 months, while United has been preparing its technical memoranda on the availability of state water, ultimately, it took a little bit of time to develop that memo, and United got us that memo at the end of April this past year. Staff forwarded that United memo on to Jarvis Fay for its review and comments, and we have received some comments back from Jarvis and Fay, and it looks as if the status of that memo, or that memo will need to be updated to clarify certain assumptions and conclusions included in that memo before they can be used in any fee study that would be used to justify a fee for the purchase of this replenishment water. In addition to that, it did take some time for DUDEC to prepare and collect all the materials that were necessary to be forwarded to Jarvis and Fay that will ultimately inform their fee study for this particular fee. And as a result, we are a little bit off of our current schedule, the goal of which would have been to have a fee in place for the next water year, or October 1 of this year. At this particular time, we've had a discussion with Jarvis and Fay, and their recommendation is that if we want to continue with our previous goal, which is to have a transparent and process engaged by all the stakeholders involved, that we do take the time necessary to have a robust stakeholder process, hold public meetings, and engage with the stakeholders and constituents that will be affected in paying this fee, so as to ensure the success of any fee that ultimately is adopted by the board. With that in mind, the next practical opportunity to put in place a fee would be consistent with the agency's billing or biannual billing, such that after October 1, the next best point at which we would have a fee put in place would be approximately April 1. So what we're talking about is continuing to work very hard through the October 1 initial deadline, and hopefully begin quite a bit of the outreach and public hearing process during the end of this year, the beginning part of next, again, with the goal of having a fee in place for April 1.
I might
Stop there.
Underline, or just to add a little bit to what Jason said, in addition to the stakeholder process that we have to have before October 1st, there's a 45-day notice and hearing period that we don't think you'd want to proceed with prior to completing the stakeholder engagement process. So those two things are driving the problem with the schedule. We could compress it, but we don't think that's your board's. I think your board wants full flushing of these. And of course, this will be used as a template for the future. There's that advantage as well.
And we've crossed this bridge before. Do it fast to do it right. And I think preference usually has been to do it right, even if it takes a little more time. Thank you, Jason. Before opening it to questions or comments from the public, any questions or comments from the board at this time?
I have a comment. So you asked United Water to prepare this technical memo, and, it's asking a lot because they have to get their information from the Department of Water Resources, and you're looking at short time availability, medium range, long range. There's so many variabilities. I mean, no one knows if we're going to get out of this drought, what kind of state water is going to be available in the next couple of years. Looking long term, is the tunnel project going to be built? There's a lot of questions about that. There's talk of agencies that were strong supporters, and now they're mediocre supporters, and maybe that support is being lost. And if, let's say, Metropolitan decided to not support the tunnels, the whole thing would cascade and never be built. But so I know United Water is still waiting for more information from the Department of Water Resources, but how valuable it's going to be and what they can talk about, just precise availability, that's just not going to happen. But anyway, I know United's doing the best we can, but I think it's going to be better to just deal with long-range averages that we've seen as far as availability, and Article 21 water, Table A water. I think it's probably going to be your best bet as far as what the true availability is going to be, just using averages. But anyway, I want to defend United Water a little bit because, you know, their information is coming from the state, and that information is coming from the state, and it's nebulous at best.
Any other board comments before we open it to the public at this point?
It's, on that note, initially, they were a lot more confident in their number. Then when they started peeling the onion, they found out that, and then Jarvis Bay put on extra pressure, saying you're gonna have to meet this threshold of, so it started to, and it would help benefit that cause quite a bit to delay.
All right, let me then ask if there are any members of the public who have any questions or comments, wish to be heard on this matter. Please raise your hand to be recognized.
Chair, we have Shiri Klima.
Sherry, can you hear us?
Well, we couldn't hear any of the conversation basically because there's some typing or somebody over the conversation. So I know Jason was probably talking and maybe Jeff and maybe you, Chair, but I couldn't hear very much of what was being said. I think everybody else needs to be muted. The comment that we had, and I hope it's relevant because like I said, I couldn't hear the conversation. The comment that we had was just to say that we support the GMA efforts to develop a replenishment fee that funds the efforts to increase the basin's sustainable yield and to the extent possible mitigate the need for excessive ramp downs. But we would like for you all to look at this fee in a much broader way than it's in our view being looked at as too narrow of a fee. We would encourage the GMA to develop a flexible evaluation process that considers how the replenishment assessment can be used to support and encourage investments in capital improvements deemed necessary by the stakeholders. Those are all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharia. I don't think this study anticipated excluding that as a possibility. We were just looking at one item at a time. So that's.
Chair, I'm sorry, we still can I know it's not my computer, but we still can barely hear you guys. I'm not sure if there's any IT that.
There's nobody in here
tech help that
typing.
can
I'd
help
ask
over
everybody
there, but we can
listening
barely hear
online
you
to
all.
mute your computers unless you happen to be the one speaking, because that appears to be interfering. And Sherry, I don't know if you can hear me now, but I was just saying this study was for a limited purpose, not intended to exclude the possibility of broader studies for other projects and other purposes.
Kind of a two-part fee, right? This first part and the second.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. Anyone else with a question or comment?
We have Henry from Cayugas.
Good afternoon, Henry. Can you hear us?
Yes, for the record, this is Henry Gromlick, Cayugas Municipal Water District. And I had a question, I guess probably for the consultant or whoever can best answer it. If you're going to be putting together a replenishment fee based on importation of state water project through United, is that replenishment fee anticipated to be a GMA-wide fee, or is it going to be specifically targeted to the basins that receive the benefit?
Henry, this is Jeff. That hasn't been determined yet. That will be part of the study.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
None seen, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. With that, let me turn back to the board. There's been a request to delay the process, to complete the study and complete the stakeholder process. Anyone opposed to that idea, or anyone have a different thought in terms of how to proceed? Staff's asking for direction. This is the opportunity to do so.
Chair, it seems like the right thing to do, given all the things we've been told.
I agree. Let's wait. Delay it.
Director Ramirez, Director Tremblay, any other thoughts?
You go, Tony.
Oh, thanks, Carl. I agree with the recommendation in the staff report. And I should note that I'm getting, for you, Mr. Chair, I'm getting continuing chat comments that folks cannot hear board members. So just FYI. Thank you.
I'll agree with the staff recommendation. Everybody who's on the computer is very clear, but I think there's a problem in the boardroom. If that's where you are, I don't know if you're on the dais, but it's like everybody's sort of in a tank. You can hear really not, it's really poor quality. I haven't had that experience before when on Zoom, so it's unique.
We will, I think at least for item number 6, I think staff's got the direction that they requested. And while we await word from the AV booth up there, let's move on to item number 7, an update on water supply and infrastructure projects. If, please let us know if you're continuing to have difficulty hearing us. They're trying to address it, but I'm not sure what they're doing or how effective it is on this end. Because I can hear everyone who calls in, and I can certainly hear Director Tremblay, Director Ramirez, and everyone here in the boardroom, but I don't know what everyone else is experiencing.
Good afternoon, Chair West, members of the board. For the record, Kim Loeb, Fox Canyon staff. And hopefully folks are able to hear me. So this item is an update on water supply and infrastructure projects. Good. Just pulling up my presentation. If you go to the next slide, please, Jamie. You have to drive, don't you, since we're on Zoom? Okay. So we just talked about the replenishment fee, the fact that that's on a 2-track basis, the quick track to get us some funding to purchase water supplies, and then longer-term track to identify and fund large capital projects that need better definition through engineering studies. At last month's meeting, staff updated your board, gave your board reports on the projects that have been looked at in Las Posas, as well as the Oxnard and Pleasant Valley basins. Next slide, please. So there has been a lot of interest in the potential additional federal and state funding that may be coming available. On the federal side, the president announced a plan for a $2 trillion infrastructure plan in March. Bipartisan talks in Congress appear to have stalled out to try and come to a compromise on that. We don't know what that's going to look like ultimately. Likely there will be some kind of infrastructure bill, but it's too early now to know what that will look like and what funding will be available. However, on the state side, the governor's May 14th budget proposal included $300 million to Department of Water Resources for SGMA implementation, and also additional funding as part of an additional $49 million for critical data collection. Placeholder budget was passed at the state, but that'll continue to get modified through trailer bills and other things, and we won't know what the final budget looks like until summer. But much, if not all of this, is likely to survive that process, and those funds will likely be awarded through the existing state grant programs. Next slide, please. The principal grant program is the Sustainable Groundwater Management, or SGM grant program. This agency has been successful in receiving round 1 and round 3 SGM planning grant funds to help fund our GSPs, and DWR is now into the implementation grant fund side of things, and they have $77 million of Prop 68 funds allocated to a solicitation later in spring, summer of 2022. Now, can you click it one more time? I forgot you had to drive, so I have a couple animations in here. However, in the proposal solicitation package for the SGM grants, they have had this specific provision in there that basins that are adjudicated or in the process of being adjudicated are not eligible for that funding. Click it again. However, at agency's request, Assembly Member Irwin's office reached out to the DWR director, and we received word yesterday that DWR will remove that prohibition in the next funding solicitation, and that all high and medium basins with GSPs plans will be eligible for funding, including those under adjudication. Yeah, you can just show them all. So another DWR program is a technical services support program. That's the grant program that the agency successfully had 2 nested monitoring well clusters installed in Oxnard and Pleasant Valley to fill key data gaps in those basins. If additional funding comes through there, we'll be keeping our eye on that because we certainly have other data gaps we can go after. Also, there is the Integrated Regional Management Program, which has been in effect for a long time. A lot of grant funding has been awarded through that over the years. The Watersheds Coalition of Ventura County is the organization of all the members in the county through which those grant funds are applied for and awarded. Presently, there isn't a lot of funding coming through there, but maybe there will be through the new budget. Fox Canyon is a supporting member of the Watersheds Coalition, so we'll be looking there as well. And then lastly, on the state side, the State Water Board has a groundwater grant program available with about $170 million of Proposition 1 funds that they're making available. This is principally for addressing contamination issues or potential contamination for aquifers that provide drinking water, but included in there as potential opportunities are injection wells to address seawater intrusion. So we'll be looking at that as well. So in your packet, we have, again, summarized the projects principally that we're aware of, and then taken a stab on the staff level of identifying the stage those projects are at. Are they ready? Are they still in engineering? Are they conceptual? And then what would be the potential for grant funding? And the things like purchase of the state water, and incentivized following. These kind of annual programs are likely not very, would not be very successful for grant programs, but there are many of the projects which likely will be very, we should be able to go after some grant funding for them. including, AWPF expansion, the Freeman diversion. Click again. The brackish water extraction barrier project, piping to provide infrastructure for moving water away around on the plain and away from the seawater intrusion area. And you see seawater intrusion injection barriers at Hueneme and Magoo Canyon on there too. And we didn't talk about that at the last meeting. We had just, United just finished their initial modeling of the brackish water extraction barrier project. And what that showed was that that project looks like it will be effective for addressing the intrusion of seawater in the Upper Aquifer system, especially at Magoo, but also at Hueneme, but it does not address the intrusion in the Lower Aquifer system. So DUDEC has been doing some preliminary proof of concept modeling on targeted injection barriers at the two canyons, and that is looking very promising without needing inordinate amounts of water. We had a conversation recently with United staff and talked to them about what we're looking at, so we plan to meet with the United folks, and it looks like that project in combination with the brackish water barrier may be a very good way to address totally the intrusion. And then we have the Las Posas Valley Basin projects listed. Click, yeah, thanks. And you've seen these were all discussed in last month's report, and there are some possibilities there for grant funding as well. Can you go to the next page? So Fox Canyon staff plans to convene a workshop with all the other agencies in the basins, in the Fox Canyon basins. And so the purpose of this is to get everyone together, the water agencies and purveyors, United, the municipalities, the county, to gather up in one place all the capital improvement projects that all the agencies have on the books that could be potentially beneficial to the basin or produce additional water, and so that we can have a master list so that we can cooperate and coordinate on any grant applications and try to identify those projects which will be most potentially successful in bringing those grant funds to the area to help with our groundwater water supply infrastructure and supply.
So Kim, can I expand on that just a bit?
Absolutely.
For those of you who are not used to long-range capital planning, what it usually involves is this sort of vomiting on the page here, which is what we're talking about. All that we have to go from right now is what is in the GSP. When you vomit on a page like this, you take it out 20, 30 years, and then you come to the board and you say, okay, or whatever decision-making body is, how do you want to set priorities for these? And
Mr. Chair,
boards will set them.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Excuse me for interrupting. I think that Jeff is speaking, but I can't understand him. I have been I noticed that there is some discussion on the chat, or at least from 7 or 8 minutes ago, that the difficulties with the audio are the same, and that folks cannot hear board members. And I received a text that the audio is clear over the county broadcast, but the Zoom audio has problems. And I waited because I didn't want to interrupt you, Kim, on your presentation. But I cannot hear Jeff very well, if at all. I wonder if the audio issues are confined to Zoom audio and also to the board members' microphones. And I apologize again, Jeff, for interrupting you. But Mr. Chair, my thought would be that you might want to consider taking a 10-minute recess to see if we can start surmounting some of these technical issues.
I agree. Jeff's comments were like totally garbled to me, and everybody in the room over there is kind of bouncing off each other. So I mean, I have some comments, but they're out of place because I don't really know what was said. Thank you, Tony.
All right, why don't we take up that suggestion? We'll take, 10 or 15 minutes at this end to see if we can't find a solution, and we'll be back, within the next 10 or
And
15 minutes.
Mr. Chair, let me ask for clarification since I had so much, and I agree with Supervisor Ramirez, thank you. Since we had so much trouble signing in, do you want us to just stay where we are and not sign out, just stay in the session, in the
Yes,
Zoom
please.
session?
Yes, please. Please stay where you are at the risk of losing you and not being able to get you back. Just stay where you are, and when I'll announce when we're ready to come back live, that's all.
Thank you.
Jeff, when we left off, you were about to make some comments, so wait till they tell us we're good to go. All right, I guess we are back live. Hopefully, we have solved some of the audio problems. And by all means, Director Ramirez, Director Tremblay, since you're the only ones that we can see, if those audio problems persist, please let us know. Where we left off, Jeff was about to make some comments with respect to the
Mr. Chair?
water projects. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I apologize for interrupting you. I think my primary concern at this point is whether or not members of the public can hear staff and the board members during our discussions. And it appears, you may not be on Zoom, but it appears that they may not, I guess there's kind of a mixed bag. So one of them can hear all of you, but they can't hear Supervisor Ramirez and myself. Others, they can hear. So what I might suggest that you consider is there some way to poll the public on whether or not they can hear you?
Yes, this is the clerk. We are able to do that. And I do see that one of our attendees has said that he can hear everyone now. But I can type in the chat for them to confirm.
Good idea.
That
Board
would be
Member
great,
Tremblay,
Mr.
this
Chair,
is
if we could do
Jeff.
that, just to make sure the public can follow us.
Board Member Tremblay, this is Jeff. She's sitting in the chat. We'll hear back from them soon. And you should know that we tested this outside the boardroom. We took some computers out, signed into Zoom, and they were good.
All right, and I just see a chat note that that a member of the public can hear everyone now. They can only they see only Supervisor Ramirez and myself, but that the audio is good for all. So,
And I just got another text indicating that the audio is working. And indeed, we took a vote earlier and decided that the only two on the board worth looking at were Director Ramirez and you, Director Tremblay. So that's why everyone gets to see you. But with that, let us proceed then further with item 6, which was or 7, the update on the water supply and infrastructure projects and grants. Jeff, I think we were up to you.
Thank you, Chair. I was jumping off from the agency staff convening the meeting that Kim talked about. And I just wanted you to know the purpose of the meeting and what we're trying to do. The idea is that, and I called it vomiting on the page, we only know the projects that are in the GSP. And the GSP had a high threshold for to make that list. When this money comes out, and there's lots of it stirring around, and it may or may not present itself, but it's likely going to be the case that it's targeting special projects. So one of the ways we do this, we find all the projects that are out there, we put them in a pot, we come and see your board, we say, okay, here's how we would, based upon what your board has given us, the GSPs and so forth, here's how we would string them out over time. And we do that by asking you to tell us what how you want us to rank them in order. And almost always, when you're in front of a board, something that will move a project from a low priority to a high priority is the fact that there's funding available for it. So you even though you had it scheduled out maybe 10 years, because all of a sudden money becomes available, you decide, let's go get it and build it. That's a big part of this. And then, a lot of the money that comes now, the closer you are to shovel ready, the more likely you are to get funding. So we may be pushing, coming back to push projects forward to get past planning, engineering, design, permitting, right-of-way acquisition, that sort of thing, which is an effort independent of the GSP for the moment, but I will be subsumed by the GSP as this develops and we have more information. So this is a very worthwhile meeting, and it will also keep us, i.e. water agencies, from stepping on each other when we're in the rush to the money in Sacramento or in DC. So it's a worthwhile effort, and one I'd recommend that your board endorse.
Any questions or comments from the board before we ask for comments from the public?
I have a question.
With that, let me ask any members of the public who have any questions or comments.
Chair,
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Carmen. What was that?
You can't hear me. You couldn't hear me?
we can hear you now.
You can hear me now. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, this is my question. Looking at the funding that might be available from the governor, in particular, the governor's budget, the state legislature, what are the consequences of our county not being in the drought declaration that the governor put forward as an emergency? We are in a drought, but our county was not included.
So independent of the,
Maybe
this is Jeff,
it's independent.
Director Ramirez. Independent of the GMA, the county's pursuing that, trying to get a drought declaration for at least 2 of the watersheds who don't have direct access to state water. Let me explain that. Our understanding is we weren't put into the drought declaration because we're customers of Metropolitan Water. Metropolitan Water has all of their reservoirs full. You may recall that about 10 years ago, Metropolitan was being criticized for all the reservoir building they were doing.
Right.
And they were doing it as, it seemed like a contingency plan, a backup for the water tunnels. Now they're all full, and I guess we're suffering from that victory or success. But with that in mind, Santa Clara River, which is essentially OPV, and the West Las Posas, and then the Ventura River don't have direct access to state water. So I know there's an effort afoot to try and get drought declarations for those 2 watersheds. And that's about as much as I know about it. I can bring your board more information at the next meeting if you like.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, then let me open it up to the public. Anyone with questions or comments on this subject, please raise your hand to be recognized.
We have a comment from John Lindquist.
Okay, good. I just unmuted myself. Can everybody hear me?
John, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. This is John Lindquist from United Water Conservation District. And our technical staff have been in contact, as Kim noted earlier, and started discussing projects and options and modeling. And we would very much support and like to be involved in kind of a reboot of projects or continuing effort. And we think some of the projects that have been low priority because it didn't seem like they could provide a lot of water but might be helpful, they're more close to being shovel ready. And so we're prepared to discuss which projects should be moved up in the modeling priority with your staff and the public. However you want to engage, we would be happy to assist and participate in that effort.
Thank you, John. Anybody else?
We have a comment from Sherry Klima.
Hi again. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, and maybe they discussed it in the presentation, but there was a slide that said that the project for the GRAPE program, deliveries to agricultural users, it was listed in the chart and it was listed as unlikely to get grant funding, and I wasn't clear on why that is. Aside from that question, as you know, we strongly support the GMA seeking all sorts of sources of funding, and we are eager and willing to help in whatever ways we can.
Kim?
Yes, Ms. Cleveland, Kim Loeb. That particular project is for the existing water that is going to growers now, for which the city receives a recycled water allocation. And that project would be for the GMA to purchase that water for delivery to retire those allocations instead of pumping. So I think we had talked about that before. So this is really more of a program than a project. And that's why staff felt that was not likely to be something that would be successful in going after a grant.
To expand on it, this is Jeff Cherie. Kim said at the outset that programs of purchase water were not likely to be funded by grant, which is true. But the APW, or the GREAT program, is in there twice. An expansion of the GREAT program and other associated work is listed as likely to receive funding.
Did that clarify it for you?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Anyone else?
Yes, we have Henry from Cayugas.
Yes, thank you. This is Henry Gromlich from Cayugas Municipal Water District. And we support the idea of bringing together these kinds of project lists. And I guess part of what I think would be useful to discuss is there are some areas in the GMA where it's relatively unproblematic, as in United provides projects that provide benefit to portions of the GMA, and that direct is easily. Cayugas might have the opportunity to provide projects that both benefit Cayugas and have a potential to benefit the GMA. And so those are potential cost share with differential and reciprocal benefits. And I think you might be able to get some interest in cities and other agencies participating in that kind of project, rather than simply projects that solve the GMA's problems without also having some joint benefit. So I just offer that for your consideration. Look forward to cooperating with other interested agencies.
Thank you, Henry. Anyone else?
None seen, Chair.
All right, this is simply to receive a presentation, which we've done. There's no action required. With that, then we will move on to item number 8, which is the fiscal year 2021 work plan and budget.
Good afternoon again, Chair West, members of the board. For the record, Kim Loeb, Fox Canyon staff. And so as your board knows, the board must adopt a budget each year. We took a draft work plan and budget to your board's fiscal committee on May 18th for a study session, and your fiscal committee recommend bringing the work plan and budget to your board for consideration of adoption. Next slide. Oh, that was that slide. Next slide. There you go. So the budget has two components. One is the annual work plan, which has the tasking and labor that is provided by County Public Works Agency to administer and run the GMA. And then the other is the budget work plan, or budget worksheet, where the...
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, Kim, I'm very sorry. I can't see anything that you're displaying. on the screen. There is nothing on the screen. So I just want you to be aware of that. And if I can't see it, I'm on Zoom. I'm pretty sure that other folks who are on Zoom cannot see it as well.
Thank you for that, Director Tremblay. We will see if.
Can you see that, Tony? Whoops.
Yes, I can see that
Thank you. Okay.
for the first time.
Okay, so these are the two components. I was just talking about. This is not new. This is how we've been doing budget since long before I've been here. So the annual work plan for the tasking and labor, and then the budget worksheet for tracking the accounts, the revenue, and expenditures. Next slide, please. So the annual work plan, which is in your packet, is divided into the annual services of administration, fiscal record services, which is our reporting of extractions and billing, technical services, legal services, and public outreach. And then special expenditures are things like GSP implementation, developing requirements, and moving forward with procuring a new data management system and those kinds of things. Can you click it again? So this work plan includes increased staffing to address the agency's expanded duties under SGMA, and it moves from 7.3 to 8.9 full-time equivalent staff, includes an office assistant in record services to help administer the different allocation systems in the different basins, beef up our staffing for prospective replenishment fees, and provide timely service to pumpers, and also an operations manager to oversee routine operations such as groundwater extraction reporting, well and flow meter registration, the AMI program, compliance, as well as the procurement and implementation of a new data management system down the road. This will enable groundwater manager to have more focus on GSP implementation, project development and implementation, replenishment fees, studies, going after grant funds, and those kinds of things. In your packet also are two analyses that the fiscal committee asked to see be included in the packet, and that is a look at the current fiscal year that we're just coming to the end of, the work plan, the task budgets, and the actual time spent and costs in those tasks. And overall, we're pretty much on target, but working in our dynamic environment, the time spent in the individual tasks varies from that planning document. And then also another analysis that showed our analysis of where the new manager's hours would fall into the tasks in the work plan. So those are in your packet if you want to refer to them. Next slide. So the proposed budget, we have a projected beginning balance of about 2.7 million total fund balance, operating fund a little over $1 million, revenues looking at 2.5 million, operating expenses about 2.9, and contingency of 100,000, with an ending operating fund balance of about 523,000. In your designated accounts, the GEMS Legal Reserve Fund looks to end the next fiscal year a deficit of about 328,000. That's right on track with our projections from the new fee that was enacted. We'll talk about that in a minute. Surcharges projected at 2.6 million, and then carrying through your board's designated 1 million operating reserves for a projected year-end balance of about $3.8 million. Next slide. So these are the revenue projections and the operating accounts. We have the $6 per acre foot fee, the sustainability fee of $14 an acre feet, a little bit of interest earnings, and then penalties that are assessed. And you can see the amounts there. And then in the designated accounts, your board enacted a reserve fee of $20 an acre foot that went into effect on January 1st, and that's projected to bring in a little less than $2.4 million. And then surcharges has a projection of $750,000. Next slide, please. In terms of annual expenditures, and this is all on the budget worksheet, these are the annual expenditures, principal ones over $10,000. There's the General Services Agency expenses of the boardroom, all our printing, all our mail and shipping of $20,000. Our routine legal services, $177,000. Some software and website licenses, computer, about 12. Supporting our FCGMA online data management system, about $138,000. That includes a $12,000 annual GIS license. And then the annual reports at $60,000. You click it. Special expenditures, we've got plenty amounts of $150,000 to continue the data management requirements. Most of that has been funded through the sub-grant from the Nature Conservancy. It's being pushed into the next fiscal year in terms of completing that project. Placeholder amount of $100,000 for GSP implementation. We look at that principally for consultant expenses. Stakeholder facilitation or outreach, $50,000. And then this Oxnard well destruction that was pushed out from last year into this coming fiscal year, largely due to the pandemic, but we'll get that destroyed. Click once more. PWA charges and contingency at PWA charges at 2.1 million, and then 100,000 contingency. One more click. And that might get covered by the, there you go. Litigation expenses, these are projected at little less than 1.4 million, and county council litigation expenses at about 121,000. And these are the same as were projected when you adopted that reserve fee. Next slide, please. This is the summary table of the fund balances over time. The last year's year-end actuals, the current year, fiscal year 21, adopted budget and projected year-end, this draft budget that your board's considering now, and then planning level budgets into the next couple out years. You'll see the designated gems accounts projected presently to come back into the black in your fiscal year 24. That's when that reserve fee sunsets unless your board renews it. The surcharges account is accruing as surcharges are assessed. Operating reserves is just the $1 million. And then the operating fund, you can see, looks to have a potential imbalance as we get into the out years. We will keep an eye on that on the last planning year, and we'll advise your board well in advance if it looks to be an issue. Next slide. So that concludes my report to you on the budget. Our recommendation is that you receive and file this report, provide any feedback and direction to staff that you have on the budget, and then adopt the fiscal year 21-22 annual work plan and budget.
Thank you, Kim. And I guess on behalf of the fiscal committee, thank you also for those supplemental schedules that you provided, including the information we requested. It made it a lot more comprehensible for us. Thank you. With that, any questions or comments from the board at this time before we open it up to the public?
I have a question.
Yes, Director Ramirez?
Thank you. Could you just say, Mr. Love, what, I know it's not a lot of money invested, but where is it invested? Is it with the treasurer? Our county treasurer's LIAIF fund?
Director Ramirez, yes, it is.
Okay, good to know. And this is my first few months on Fox Canyon. In terms of the legal fees, is it a large increase over the last couple of years? I'm looking at this outside counsel, and I think she's doing a great job for us. I'm not suggesting she's not, as is our county counsel, but it's outside counsel's 1.3 million. Is that an increase? I would imagine there's something there because of all the litigation.
Well, Director Ramirez, yeah, the details of that are in the basically the fee study that was presented to the board back, I want to say October, but I'm not sure. But
It was late last year.
yeah, late last year when the board considered implementing a fee to continue to replenish that legal reserve fund. So the details of that are there. That amount has not been changed since that time. Of course, we'll continue to look at that and get input from our county council if that needs to be adjusted. But yes, absolutely, those are increasing expenses due to the litigation.
I hope, I'm a lawyer. I respect and like most lawyers, including my colleague here, Mr. Tremblay. But I hope we don't run out of money and when we could be theoretically using it for actually water projects and staffing and stuff. But you have to defend. We have to defend. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, and thank you, Director Ramirez. And I think I go back to the public comments offered by Mr. Perello at the beginning of the meeting, which I think were well taken. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board before we open it up to the public? Hearing none, then let me ask any of the public who have any questions or comments to raise your hand so you can be recognized.
None seen, Chair.
All right, then thank you. Returning back to the board, any other questions or comments, or is there a motion at this time to adopt the fiscal 2021 work plan and budget?
Also moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second it.
A motion and a second, and we need a roll call.
Chair West,
Yes.
Director Ramirez,
Yes.
Director Mobley,
Yes.
Director Tremblay,
Yes.
Director Borchard.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Moving on then to item number 9, an update on drought and groundwater conditions.
Good afternoon, Chair West, members of the board. Kim Loeb once again for Fox Canyon. Jamie is bringing up the presentation, but as we all know, and as Director Ramirez has pointed out, we are in a drought. And
Not that one.
The U.S. Drought Monitor shows us in an extreme drought. And May 10th, both the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Small Business Administrations designated the county a disaster area for purposes of making disaster loans available to small businesses and farmers. Next slide, please. So traditionally, the agency has looked at the average of 5 state rain stations that are in Camarillo, Oxnard, Moore Park, Somas, and Saticoy for the purpose of efficiency allocations and determining a water year. This shows the average rainfall at those stations over the last 25 years, and then shows that the normal at those rain stations over the history of the rain stations measurements is 14.5 inches. Over the last 25 years, it's 13.75 inches. This year, it was 3 inches. So and many rain stations throughout the county are inches below their historical low rainfall that they've received in the past. United's diversions from the Santa Clara River similarly are considerably lower than normal, which directly affects the water supply in the aquifers in the Oxnard and Pleasant Valley and West Las Posas. Can you click it again, Jamie? And looking at the last 10 years, you can see that 8 of the last 10 years have been both below the normal and average, significantly below. So that's a major challenge for us here. Next slide, please. So I apologize to the board members. For some reason, these didn't print right in your printed package, but they do show correctly in the PDF online. And so these are some example hydrographs over the last 10 years in the Oxnard Basin, in the upper aquifer system, and at some select example wells. And so from those, you can see that, I should mention, these were measured in the first quarter of the year. And you can see that were quite the declining trends until 2019 when we had slightly above normal rainfall, but we also had considerable amount of diversions by United at Freeman to both recharge and pipelines, including the 15,000 acre feet that was provided through the grant by this agency. And that you started to see some uptick there on that, but now we're starting to see those water levels decline again. Can you click it again? And we just went out and measured some of the wells last week, and we're seeing in the upper aquifer system they're declining 2 to 7 feet from these levels. Next figure, please. This is the lower aquifer system, very similar trends. Can you click it again? And those water levels, when measured just recently, are decreased up to 29 feet from these levels that we're seeing here. Next slide. In Pleasant Valley Basin, you can see the general decline. These are 10 years again. General decline up until really through the drought through 2015, and then saw seasonal response, but generally showing a declining trend. Next slide. Oh, and these, when measured last week, were up 27 feet lower in water levels in general. In the West Las Posas, can you click again? Thanks. In the West Las Posas, looks very similar to what we're seeing in the Oxnard Basin. declining trends over the last 10 years. Click once again. And 1 to 10 feet lower in the wells that were measured last week. Last slide. In East Las Posas, it's a bit of a different story depending on where you are. In the southern portion of the basin there, there's a bit of a decline, at least in a slight decline in 2 wells there. Up in the central portion of the basin, you do see a good uptick in 2019. In fact, slight increasing trend. That's generally related to Callegas's injection at their ASR wells there in that location. And so that's the end of my just brief overview of where we're looking at drought. We expect all these water levels to start declining pretty significantly as we get into the summer months and pumping really comes up and there isn't much replenishment.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions or comments from the board before we ask the public to participate? Hearing none, then let me ask any members of the public who have any questions or comments on this item to please raise your hand and be recognized.
We have John Grether.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, John, thank you.
Yes, a question I have is, are these the wells that were identified in the various GSPs as the monitoring wells?
Mr. Grether, that's a good question. These are not specifically the MTMO wells. We will be coming back to the board with a report on those. These are wells that we had water level data on that we could bring quickly to the board and demonstrate. But that is a good question. We will be bringing a report to the board at a future board meeting on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else?
None seen, Chair.
All right, thank you. Any further questions or comments from the board? If it wasn't apparent already, the drought's real and it's going to be with us for quite a while. Unless you've got a solution to suggest, I think this item is done.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, all right. Let's move on next to item number 10, which is an update on processing of variances.
Good afternoon, Chair West and directors. For the record, my name is Kathleen Rydell.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was trying to get through, and I apologize to Ms. Rydell. So I have a couple of matters just of procedure to inquire about the chair and of council. I have a conflict regarding the first variance request listed, and I will not be participating in that item. Might I inquire of the chair what portion of this staff presentation regarding the variances may I participate in? And I can declare the conflict at this point, but I need some guidance from the chair. And as the chair is aware, I've got to leave at 3:50, or approximately 3:50 p.m. this afternoon to attend my city council meeting. So depending on how long that first variance item is heard, I may need to leave before the other variances are heard. So could I get some guidance from the chair and from Mr. Boada as to how to proceed here? And then I also would like some guidance as, I know how to shut off the video and mute myself, but I guess I can still hear the presentation. So anyway, could you give me some guidance, please?
Sure. Given your time constraints, let me suggest this. We will proceed with the presentation and then proceed to the evaluation of the various variance requests, saving for last the single item on which there's the conflict. And I think that's the first one in our board packet, the one that involves Yamamoto Farms. So we'll do that for last. Hopefully that won't exhaust you. We won't waste your time that way. And I think it's when we get to that, we'll ask Kathleen to indicate that that's where we're moving and ask you at that point to go ahead and turn off your mic if you're still here.
Well, all right, Mr. Chair, I guess a couple things. One is, I was thinking probably, well, number one, then it's all right for me to go ahead and listen to this presentation, the generalized staff presentation on variances now. And then it's the board's intention, the chair's intention to call the other two variance items, am I correct, prior to the Yamamoto Farms Nauman Ranch variance application?
Yes.
And Mr. Boada, do you concur that no issue from my standpoint participating? I can provide the conflict, and perhaps I should do so, Mr. Chair, to just state it for the record, if I might. And that is, I'm going to recuse myself on that specific variance item due to a common law conflict on the variance application from Yamamoto Farms Nauman Ranch because my spouse and I are longtime friends of the extended Yamamoto family. So I need to recuse myself on that. So with that in mind, I can go ahead then, as I understand it, Mr. Boada and Mr. Chair, on listening to the presentation and as long as I'm here listening to and participating in the discussion on the other variances, correct?
Director Tremblay, this is Jason Kandra sitting in for County
Thanks,
Council Boada. Before answering your question, I just had a question for Ms. Rydell. Is it such that your presentation, it can be segmented such that we can address the Yamamoto variance separately from the rest of them?
I provide a presentation of the overview of everything, and then the discussion for the board can be moved to the end.
I guess my question, just to be very specific, is your presentation set up such that there will be an intro part and then we'll be turning our attention to each individual variance application?
There's an overview, and then there's a presentation of the individual variances. It's just a presentation. And as far as the board's deliberation and consideration of these applications, it can occur at the end.
Okay. To the extent that you understand Director Tremblay's comment, if you could make sure that the first part of your presentation, the overview, does not touch on the Yamamoto variance, I think that we can properly accommodate Director Tremblay's conflict and do as the chair suggested, which is take the variances out of order. The board can consider the variances out of the order presented in the packet such that the Yamamoto variance is considered last.
Okay, so is it the board's wish that I do presentations of each of the individual variance requests and that the board wishes to deliberate after I make the individual presentations?
Is that what you had contemplated apart from your general presentation?
I have a general overview presentation and give a general overview of each of the variances that's incorporated, and the recommendations are at the end, at which time your board could either review the applications at the end, or if you wish to break after I do each individual presentation, I can break so that you can make a decision at that time.
Yeah, I think that would flow more easily. So if you do the general presentation without regard to the specific variance requests, then we will move to the variance request one at a time,
Okay.
with the Yamamoto Farms variance request last.
Okay.
Okay.
We can skip over those slides and then come back to them at the end.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
And thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Kanger. Just to confirm then, this will be a general presentation, but if there was a general overview from Ms. Rydell that included specific information on the variance, at that point I would have to leave the meeting, whatever that means from a conflict standpoint. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So title of the presentation, Update on Processing of Applications for Variance to Extraction Allocations Set by the Oxnard-Pleasant Valley Basin's Allocation Ordinance and the consideration of variance applications submitted by Yamamoto Farms, Newman Ranch, provides a state well number on the title, Com Code YAM2, Meyerstein Trust, operator Ag Land Services, Com Code No Clue, and then Carmen Cisneros, and that is Com Code Cisneros. So moving on to our next slide. So the standards for granting variances are established in Article 11 of the ordinance establishing the new pumping allocations for the Oxnard and Pleasant Valley groundwater basins. And it was adopted by your board on October 23rd, 2019. The policies and procedures for granting variances are established in Resolution 2020-03. It was adopted on April 22nd, 2020. In there, it establishes the requirements to bring into compliance non-reported extractions, extractions from unregistered wells that would come to your board. And then it also includes other variants, requests for allocation based on changes in crops, land use, receipt of water from a water purveyor. Next slide. This presentation deals with the class of other variance requests. Other variance requests go first to a variance review committee that was established in the resolution or in the ordinance. And the variance review committee has 7 members that were appointed by your board on June 24th, 2020. There are 4 members from the agricultural sector and 3 from the M&I sector. The committee has met on 4 occasions, and that is April 6th, May 6th, May 17th, and June 14th of this year. At the first meeting, the committee selected Jared Bouchard as the chair, and the secretary is Greg Lewis. The agendas are posted for these meetings on the agency website. I would like to read at this time the standards for determining or establishing variances that in order to grant those variances. Those are defined in Article 11 of the OPV allocation ordinance. So in Article 11, variance purpose and standards, the sole purpose of any variance shall be to enable an owner or operator to make reasonable use of groundwater in the same manner as other users of groundwater in the basins. Before any variance may be granted, the owner or operator must establish that, and the agency must determine that all of the following standards are met. Next slide. Okay, that's it. 1, that there are special circumstances or exceptional characteristics applicable to the owner or operator which do not apply generally to comparable owners or operators in the basins. 2, that granting a variance will not confer a special privilege inconsistent with the limitations upon other owners and operators in the basins. And 3, that denial of a variance will result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships inconsistent with the general purpose of this ordinance. And 4, next slide, that the granting of a variance will not be inconsistent with the Groundwater Sustainability Plan or the provisions of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act or with other regulations or ordinances of the agency, or detrimental to the agency's ability to improve and protect the quantity or quality of groundwater supplies within the basins. And lastly, number 5, that the granting of a variance will not substantially impede the agency's ability to achieve sustainable groundwater management or the actual sustainability of groundwater in the basins. So these allocations, when granted for these variances, these other variances, the requests are not additive to the total basin available yield. They are actually become proportionally out of all the other operators' allocation in the Oxnard subbasin and the Pleasant Valley Basin, so that the available yield, sustainable yield, does not change. Available yield. Next slide. Thus far, 12 applications have gone before the Variance Review Committee. They have been on the agendas, and 4 applications are to be reviewed here today. The table on the screen is an excerpt from the table from the staff report. It has those applications that have been reviewed or were reviewed April 6th and May 17th. The column that has it's VRC, but the Variance Review Committee recommendations, those with data listed in that table are the ones that are before you today. Next slide. And so if you wish to follow along in your agenda package, there is packets associated with each of the applications. Those applications are generally organized in the following manner, so in case you would prefer to go through your agenda package, you can follow along, and you can use those as references as I'm speaking, or if you want to look at those. Number one in the agenda, in these individual packets, is the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Staff Memorandum. This is followed generally by a location map. This is followed by the initial allocation table. That was the letter that went out. It's the table that was associated with that letter. So this is the table showing their allocation. Number 4 is the variance application. Number 5 is any supplemental information that the applicant provided. Number 6 is the agency's initial review letter, which was issued after the application was submitted, but not necessarily after the supplemental information was submitted. So it likely is requesting information that was provided in the supplemental response. 7 is extraction history. This can be both by well or by COM code, which would list the well. Typically, we have either the full extraction history or it has since 2005 so that it shows the allocation-based period generally to date of what's been filed. And number 8 is any relevant data that was in the FCGMA files that is included for your consideration. And then following that, and those are items, the general organization, these packets are items 10A, 10C, and 10F, attachments to this board letter. And then the Variance Review Committee's findings and recommendations are following that application packet that's in your agenda packet. So those are items 10B, 10D, and E, and 10G. So as this first one is of concern, we'll skip over this slide. So thank you for skipping over to the next one is no clue.
Thank you, let me get there. I got it. Thank you.
Okay, so the one that being presented, no clue is the COM code. They have 2 applications submitted. They tied the 2 wells together such that their request was to be split for the 2 wells. They had an initial additional allocation and they split between the 2 so that these are a combined request. The owner of the wells, and let's look at the slide, the picture, the map on this off to the right side of the screen. In the lower left are 2 wells with stars. Those 2 wells are the wells for which the applications have been filed. Those are along Los Angeles Avenue. They're on the north side of Los Angeles Avenue, over by South Mountain. And those wells are on an easement on land owned by another party. And so they granted the easements. Those easements were granted prior to 1986 because the first extractions from these, reported extractions from these wells to the agency are reported starting 1986, 186, 187. And so the water is extracted from these wells, from this easement, and then pumped up to, through piping up to the parcels that are outlined on the map. So this includes the Oxnard subbasin, it includes the expansion area, it includes the West Las Posas management area, and includes plantings in the outcrop area. And It is reported that all of that, and comparing it to previous studies done by the agency, with a small exception, this is grandfathered plantings. So the owner of the wells are Meyerstein Trust. They are not the owners of the land on which the wells are located, but they are the owners, to clarify, because there was, it was stated in the board letter that they own the land, but they do not. They own the wells. The operator is Ag Land Services. The initial allocation for the two wells, the well ending with 07Q01, is 152, rounded up to 153 acre-feet per year. The second well, 18B02, has an allocation rounded to 107 acre-feet per year. And on the screen, the exact amount is shown for those that cannot see the screen. Additional allocation requested is rounded up to 53 acre-feet per year. The total requested allocation is 313 acre-feet per year. Summarizing and just putting it into a little nutshell, the more details are in the variance application. They're also in other places, but just to summarize it very briefly, the maturity, the reason cited for this variance request, maturity of a portion of the orchard grove, it's an avocado grove. Fire damage, there was a fire in 2003, there's been fires since, but they were concerned about the fire damage from 2003 and damage to those trees, and the number of trees planted during the base period. Oh, and I'd like to note on the picture, you can see the blue line indicates the boundary between the Oxnard Subbasin and the West Las Posas Management Area. The red line is the agency's boundary, and so that you can see what portion at the top is planted in the expansion area. Next slide. So this is their extraction history going back as far as 2005 to 2020. The extraction history is presented in the agenda packet as in item 10C, page 19 of 32, if you wish to follow in the agenda packet. The total initial allocations combined for both wells is 260 acre-feet rounded. And then the 2010 to 2020 average is 255, rounded up to 256 acre-feet per year. So the average from 2015 to 2020 of extractions reported is 275 acre-feet per year. And once again, the request is for 313 acre-feet per year. You can see on the far right-hand column, total year, the combination of the two wells, what the extractions combined for the years are. So if you wish to do that comparison. So next slide. So the Variance Review Committee's finding and recommendations, those are items 10D and 10E in the agenda packet. And there's 4 members found that there were no special circumstances or exceptional characteristics per section 11.1.1. 3 members found that there were special circumstances or exceptional characteristics. They cited fire damage. There was a recommendation of prorating the request based on the percentage of acreage in the Oxnard Subbasin. I'm going back to the previous first one. So this was reviewed on the second day. The Variance Review Committee recommends a denial. It was a 4-3 vote. Staff evaluated the reported groundwater extractions and did not observe from before the fire to after the fire, looking at the water use, and did not see a significant change in water use. And it is staff's recommendation that your board deny the 2 variance requests, and that is for your consideration, but you do have the Variance Review Committee's recommendations, which are for your consideration. So if you wish to, before going on to the next one.
Before going on to the next one, let me first ask if there is anyone in the public who wishes to speak to or against the two variance applications from the Meyerson Trust. If so, raise your hand and the clerk of the board will recognize you.
None seen, Chair.
All right. All right, let me then turn it to the board for consideration of this, of these two. I guess they're substantially similar, just different wells, of these two variance application requests. Any questions, comments, recommendations, or proposals from any members of the board?
I have a question. Considering Gary Arnold's association with Ag Land Services, why didn't he recuse himself I mean, why did he vote? It seems like he has a conflict. Was that brought up?
Director Mobley, Jason Kanger, County Counsel's Office. Because this board is purely providing a recommendation, it is not taking any action on any particular application. It's not making any decision or approving or denying any decision. The Political Reform Act takes purely advisory bodies that are only charged with making recommendations and not taking any actions. Those bodies are outside of the Political Reform Act, and thus there is no potential for them to, no potential for their recommendation to result in a conflict. Said differently, the Political Reform Act and its conflict provisions really only apply to legislative bodies that are taking, that are making decisions, approving or denying an item.
And I bring it up because of the staff report on page 3 of 3, right? I mean, it asks members declaring conflict of interest if applicable. So it mentions that, but, so it doesn't, you know, there's never going to be any conflicts.
There's not going to be any conflicts amongst this particular advisory body. That's correct.
I'm good.
Kathleen, I may have missed it in your comments. I see the recommendations from the Variance Review Committee. Does staff have a recommendation on either or both of these variance requests?
As stated on the last slide, yes, and in our staff report, we recommend denial.
Chair?
Yes.
Chair West, I want to follow up on Director Mobley's comments, and I recognize by our council's statement that there isn't a specific legal conflict pursuant to the Fair Political Reform Act, Political Practices Act, that elected officials and appointed officials have to comply with upon pain of fines or worse. But there is a public perception problem that we encounter all over the place. And we just heard Director Tremblay talk about, although he didn't have a legal conflict, he didn't want it to look like he was, forgive me for jumping in on what you said, Director Tremblay, but I think it's really important for the public to have trust in the process. So I'm troubled by this, and I know we may differ about it, but I just want to state it for the public who's listening, maybe not familiar with all of the nuances here, that it's not a good look to have someone who's actually directly associated to be recommending a particular way. So I wanted to just say that it's not something that I believe should be overlooked. And no offense to the gentleman involved, because I don't know him. I just think it's not a good look for us. So I would go with the staff's recommendation at this point.
All right, at this point, it's incumbent on the board to act or choose not to act on the variance requests, and we can consider them jointly since they're the only difference is the two different COM codes, I guess, the different wells involved.
No, it's two wells on the same COM code. They act together. Both supply water to the same area.
So with that, is there a motion to grant or deny the variance request?
I move to deny the variance request.
There's a motion to deny the variance request. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's a motion and a second, and because we have remote participation, we need a roll call.
Chair West,
Yes.
Director Ramirez,
Yes.
Director Mobley,
Yes.
Director Tremblay,
Yes.
Director Borchard.
Yes.
All right, moving on then to 10F, which is the Cisneros variance request. Take it away.
Okay, if we could go down to slide 17. Okay, the Cisneros application. It's well 02 North, 21 West, 18H13. The owner and operator is Carmen Cisneros. The well usage is domestic. The initial allocation for the well is 0.879 acre feet per year. The requested additional allocation is 1.621 acre feet per year. The requested total allocation is 2.5 acre feet per year. And if you will look on the map, the yellow box outlines the parcel boundary. The well is the only active well within that parcel. It is on the south side of Los Angeles Avenue. It is right along the border between the Oxnard Subbasin and the West Las Posas Management Area. And so going forward with that, the reasons cited, and this is apparently a farm-related trucking operation. Reason cited is that the primary well, the well is the primary source of water. The new well with pump was installed, well, the pump on the well, and it was a new well, was installed in 2010. It had a baseline allocation for under historical allocation period and under emergency ordinance E of 2.5 acre feet per year. So that has been their allocation up until the new allocation system. Next slide. This is their extraction history. The well was drilled in November 2006. The well was registered in approximately 2008. They claim that due to financial difficulties, a pump was not put into the well per the applicant until 2010. The average annual extractions, and this is the extraction history that's on the screen. It is item 10F on page 9 of 30, if you want to follow in your agenda packet. And so the average annual extractions 2013 to 2020 is 0.977 acre feet per year. It should be noted that the initial allocation was reduced because they had some surcharges. They had extracted more than 2.5 acre feet in a particular year, and that's why their allocation was reduced, initial allocation. So you can see, though, up until 2013, they were estimating that up through 2012, they were estimating their extractions. In 2013, they got a flow meter, so you can see accurate readings of their usage based on a calibrated flow meter. And so this is their extraction history. Next page, next slide. The Variance Review Committee's findings and recommendations. 5 members found that there were no special circumstances or exceptional characteristics per section 11.1.1. 2 members found that there were special circumstances or exceptional characteristics per section of Article 11. The Variance Review Committee recommends denial. It was a 5-2 vote. Staff recommends that your board approve a variance for a total allocation of 1 acre foot per year. That provides an additional allocation of 0.121 acre feet per year. The basis for this is past allocation systems have allowed a and recognize that good use of groundwater up to 1 acre-foot would be acceptable. So that's in the ordinance code associated with, say, baseline allocation for consideration.
And just as a point of clarification, looking at 10G, page 2 of 3, the Variance Review Committee report, it appears to be a 6-1 vote
Oh, 6-1?
to deny.
Chair West, Kim Loeb, that was incorrectly recorded on that memo, that once they voted 5-2 against recognizing a special circumstance, and since all 5 of those conditions need to be met, that was the final vote on that. So it just was recorded incorrectly on that.
Well, thank you, thank you. All right, so we have 2 different recommendations. We have the recommendation to deny the variance request from the Variance Review Committee and a recommendation by staff to increase the allocation to 1 acre-foot per year, small increase above the 0.879 they already have. Thank you, Kathleen. Let me then ask any members of the public if there's anyone who wishes to speak to or oppose this variance request, please raise your hand and so indicate.
None seen, Chair.
Okay, then any questions or comments from the board? And, or is there a motion with respect to the disposition of this variance request?
Director Ramirez has her hand raised.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask Ms. Rydell because
We cannot hear you.
Staff's recommendation.
Is your mic on?
You can't hear me?
Director Ramirez.
Yes. Can you hear me? No? Can't hear me?
I can't hear you.
Frustrating.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
can you hear me?
I can.
I can hear Supervisor Ramirez, and I'm on Zoom.
What did she say?
Yeah, what do you want?
I'll translate. You'll translate for me.
Now we can hear you. Now we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. All right. I'll be quick. The staff is recommending something very different from the committee. And it's my understanding that there has to be special circumstances or exceptional characteristics. Can you explain, Ms. Rydell?
Explain why the staff's recommendation is different than the committee's.
Special circumstances are that the well was not in operation during the entire base period. It was only available for part of the base period due to financial concerns. They didn't get the pump, and so they only have a small portion to be averaged over the 10-year period. There are also concerns, domestic, well, that would be a special circumstance of not having the well.
Got it. Thank you.
Do you want me to go through the different 5?
No, that's fine. I think that answered the question. And that was I know in the days when we were trying to craft the policy with respect to variances, that was an important consideration, that there were some wells that didn't have, a history throughout the entire base period. We wanted to figure out a way to accommodate those wells with a shorter time horizon or a shorter history. Any other questions or comments or recommendations with respect to the disposition of this variance request?
I'll move the staff's recommendation.
All right, and is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Second.
The motion and a second and a roll call.
Chair West,
Yes.
Director Ramirez,
Yes.
Director Mobley,
Yes.
Director Tremblay,
Yes.
Director Borchard.
Yes.
All right, thank you. With that, we are ready to move on to the Yamamoto Farms variance request. We will say goodbye to Director Tremblay, since he has to leave in 4 minutes anyway, and I'm sure we won't be finished. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to reiterate for the record that my recusal is not based upon a legal conflict of interest. It's based upon a common law conflict of interest, which I previously articulated. And with that, I'll go ahead and leave the meeting. Thank you very much.
thank you.
So the slide is slide 10.
Thank you.
So the final application for your consideration today is well 01 North, 21 West, 09D03 for COM code YAM-2. The well is located, it's shown on the screen on the map as with a star. The parcel is outlined in yellow. It is west or east of Wood Road, south of 5th Street, north of Laguna Road, and it is in the Oxnard Subbasin, but is close to the boundary with the Pleasant Valley Basin. Also on this parcel is a second application for a variance application, which is not before you today. That parcel is operated by 2 different COM codes, so there's 2 different operators. The one being considered today as a greenhouse operation. The other COM code on that parcel is a field growing operation. The field operation receives Pleasant Valley County Water District water. And then the greenhouse operation today, their source of water is a well, and they claim that that's the only source of water for the greenhouse operation. So that is what's before you today.
I don't understand that.
Oh,
If the parcel's already receiving water from the Pleasant Valley Basin, how is it that that greenhouse operation doesn't have access to that water?
the applicant says that they use only the well water and not
My question wasn't about
Okay.
what they use. My question was about access.
Oh,
That's fine. Proceed.
okay, next slide. So the owner is Tom Yamamoto of Yamamoto Farms. The operator is Brian Nauman of Nauman Ranch. The operation is a greenhouse operation, but includes plants grown outside. The field, I have a elliptical, or not quite a circle, showing the area of interest and the concern for this variance application. The field to the north of the greenhouses and to the west of the greenhouses are where they grow plants that they started in the greenhouse and they move out to the field. The well is shown with a star, or indicated with a star. And you can see in the corner of the parcel, the label, it's the last portion of the state well number 09C04, the COM code DJF. That is the well that serves, provides part of the water for the field operation on that parcel. So as I say, initial allocation is 9.913 acre feet per year. The requested additional allocation is 15 acre feet per year, rounded. And the total requested allocation is 25 acre feet per year. The reason cited is current operations have increased. It was underutilized during the allocation-based period, as reported in the application. Money has been invested for improvements. They report that several $100,000 were invested in making improvements to the greenhouses and the plans to increase operations. So they cited in their supplemental information, they provided what they plan to do to increase production in the greenhouses and what additional water would be needed. Next slide. This is their extraction history beginning in 2005. You'll notice in looking at that is that there was a great deal of water extracted in 2015. In researching that, the water was provided based on their annual efficiency allocation applications for the on-site operation, the other operation on the site. that water was provided from this well for that operation to the tune of 117.490 acre feet in 2015-1 and 13.760 acre feet were provided in the second half of 2015. So just to bring your attention to that. And then you can see what they've been extracting through 2020-2. Next slide. The variance review committees, this was on the first day they had expressed concerns. Well, this is their findings and recommendations. It's item 10B in the agenda packet. The committee had expressed concerns about not really fully understanding all of the factors, the 5 standards for which they are to determine the variances and make their recommendations. The 4 agricultural committee members voted to recommend approval, and the 3 M&I representatives voted to recommend denial. It was cited that this is a new operation with significant increase in water demand, and it was noted that they stated that they should not have planned on increasing water use in an overdrafted basin. That was their reason citing for recommending denial. It is staff's recommendation that you deny the application as it's inconsistent with past board actions, which include the well permits for Dario Grossberger and Ray Vaca. And it also is contrary to variance requests requested by R&R Recycling and M&I Bosque on for emergency ordinance. Those were variances that came before the board or were considered. It would set a precedent for more allocation whenever someone desires to increase water demand and expand their businesses. So that is staff's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. Let me then open it up to the public and ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak to or oppose this variance request. Please raise your hand to be recognized.
Oh my gosh.
Lose sound.
Hello?
Hello. Seems like sound cut out.
Okay. Yes, Chair, we have Lucia McGovern.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Can you hear me?
Yes, Lucy, thank you.
For the record, my name is Lucia McGovern. I'm with the City of Camarillo, but I'm also a committee member for the variance committee of this agency. And I wanted to reinstate the reason why I voted to deny this application before you today. And that reason is, according to the information that was provided to us as a committee, that these operations began expanding their plantings in 2019. And one of the things that we've talked about for years, maybe even since 2014, that these allocation cutbacks were basically coming to fruition. And in 2019 that happened. And so for a business model to be trying to plant, not making adjustments because of the lack of water is a little bit just not fair to the rest of the stakeholders that are pumping and trying to make sure that they're pumping within their allocation and making sure that ultimately the region meets its sustainability goals. And with that, I wanted to confirm the staff recommendation of denial of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Anyone else?
Chair, we have Sherry Klima.
Chair West, directors, I just want to concur with what Lucy just said. I think she raised a really critical point. We cannot be encouraging people to change their operations right now in a way that asks for more water. They need to be looking at ways to scale back on their use of water. In addition to that, I just wanted to make a request of staff. They've really prepared this variance committee well. And I think they've given them some really good guidelines and some good suggestions on how to make these findings. I think it would be really helpful. I know it would be helpful to those of us watching those meetings if we could hear staff's recommendation on these variances at those meetings rather than just now, because I think the variance committee could really benefit from staff's recommendation on whether to grant or not.
Sherry, I can tell you that when the committee was contemplated, the thought was to have staff recommendations be completely separate and independent from the committees to avoid the risk that staff influenced the outcome of the committee deliberation. That's why they're separate.
I appreciate that, Chair. I think that your staff has a very strong understanding of a lot of these situations, and I know when I watch these, I certainly don't have the background that they have in a lot of these, and so I can appreciate not wanting to influence, but I will tell you, I would, if I were sitting on that committee, I would certainly want to hear their recommendations and try to understand why they would recommend one way or another. Of course, I defer to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone else?
Okay. From the public.
Anyone else from the public wish to be heard in support of or opposed to this variance application?
None seen, Chair.
Okay. With that, we will, I guess, turn it back for the discussion of the board. You know, I struggled with this in reading everything because I actually struggled to find the special circumstance or exceptional characteristics that urged the variance. In addition, I too was concerned about opening the floodgates, no pun intended. You know, every time a business wants to expand its operations, it seems a lot to allow a business to do that on the backs of the other stakeholders, which is essentially what would happen here. But those are just my observations when I read through the packet. Any other questions or comments or any suggestions with respect to the disposition of this variance request?
Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. I would move the staff's recommendation. I totally agree with you. This would encourage others to start ramping up their production when we need to really conserve water. So I would move to deny the variance application.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it and just say that, you know, we all want to expand our operations, but you got to secure the water first.
All right. There's a motion and a second. And roll call, please.
Chair West?
Yes.
Director Ramirez?
Yes.
Director Tremblay?
He's recused himself.
Director Mobley?
Yes.
Director Borchard?
Yes.
All right, moving on then. I think that's the last of the variance requests, is it not?
That is the last coming
All
to your
right.
board today.
Thank you. Let's move on to item number 11.
Okay, item number 11. Let me get my notes out.
Okay, Kathleen, can I start? For the record, this is Jeff with your staff to your board. There is a correction we'll make on the board letter at the beginning. This was an old board letter in a Word format that got recycled. You'll notice at the top, we have the last board of directors, not the current board of directors. We will make that change.
I didn't even notice that part. Yes, Kathleen, go ahead.
I apologize profusely. I'm sorry. For For the record, my name is Kathleen Rydell. I'm here to present item 11. It's the Groundwater Recovery Enhancement and Treatment Program, also known as the GREAT Program. AWPF, which stands for Advanced Water Purification Facility, update and report on compliance and effectiveness of Resolution 2013-02. Next slide. So Resolution 2013-2 was adopted June 26, 2013. It's included in your agenda packet as item 11A. Included and cited in the resolution are the Recycled Water Management Impact Analysis Plan and the Monitoring Plan. Those are included in the agenda packet. This is a report on, per the resolution, this is for the first phase of the GREAT program. And the city is to make available, per that resolution, approximately 7,000 acre-feet per year. Of that 7,000 acre-feet per year, approximately 1,800 acre-feet per year is for in-city use, and 5,200 acre-feet per year was to be available for agricultural use outside of the city. Next slide. So accrual of recycled water pumping allocation is outlined into the resolution. For each acre foot of decreased groundwater pumping, 1 acre foot of recycled water pumping allocation is accrued, and that is listed as condition 4 in the resolution. Up to 5,200 acre feet per year can be accrued of recycled water pumping allocation. That's condition number 3 of the resolution. Other resolution conditions, number 9, annual report is to be of delivery of recycled water to users. That report was submitted, the 2020 report submitted by the City of Oxnard, City of Oxnard, February 10th, 2021. That is included in item 11B of this report, staff report. Number 10, the city and recycled water users are to report groundwater extractions. That's their semi-annual extraction statements. They have provided their semi-annual extraction statements. So for those that received 2020. Number 12 is a coordination meeting. There is to be an annual coordination meeting. It's specified in the resolution that occurred on May 5th. Of 2021, and during the meeting it is to be discussed if there's any limitations on use of recycled water pumping allocation. Next slide. That was discussion was done, and the city has not been able to use any of their recycled water pumping allocation to date. They were not able to use it in 2021, and per the discussion, they will not, because of drought conditions, be able to use it in they did not use it in 2020, and they will not use it in 2021. So resolution condition number 13, annual report assessing conditions. That was provided by United Water Conservation District. That report was submitted on March 31st. And in number 18, condition number 18 of the resolution, recycled water users are required to file all required extraction reports and payment of fees and charges and penalties due. And not all recycled water users to date have been in compliance with that. In the past, for reporting, Pleasant Valley County Water District is still getting their submittals current. We did receive recently their 2015-16 report, and we are currently reviewing that. And then they're ready, based on approval of that, to submit the other reports they have staged. So we think we have some of the glitches resolved for past non-compliance. Okay, next slide. Recycled water deliveries began in February of 2016. There's a table at the end of the board packet. It's item 11E, which shows what the City of Oxnard reported as delivered and what the recycled water users have reported as received. And so that's in the packet. Deliveries have been to Southland Sod Farms starting in 2016. They were delivered water through 2020. Then Pleasant Valley County Water District did not receive water in 2020. They received it 2016 through 2019, and Ryder Brothers received water from 2017 through 2019. The reasons, I understand there's various reasons why they did not have these other water users. There's issues with the salinity pipeline is no longer available to convey the water, and the city is working on installing another pipeline. And so there's a combination, and this Pleasant Valley County Water District received additional water from Camarosa in 2020. There's discrepancies in reporting, if you'll notice some minor discrepancies, and that's timing and meter readings. So next slide. So going back to a summary of the table, which is item 11E. In summary, the city's reported recycled water deliveries are in the column next to the year. So a total, the city has delivered to date, as of the end of 2020, 6,107 acre feet of water, recycled water, and the accrued recycled water pumping allocation accrued to date is 717. The discrepancy is dealing with Pleasant Valley County Water District's filing of annual efficiency allocation applications and getting those complete to account for the water to show that the water delivered replaced groundwater pumping without incurring surcharges. So we're working on that, or they're working on that. Next slide. So during this meeting that we just had, the coordination meeting in May, the city has requested that the resolution be revisited. It was dating back to 2013. It was prior to the adoption of emergency ordinance E. It was in a previous allocation. We were working under historical allocation and baseline allocation and irrigation efficiency. And so it was under a different allocation system. And since then we have the allocation systems under emergency ordinance E. The ordinance refers to has outdated language referring to these older allocation systems. Plus, it was prior to the adoption of the groundwater sustainability plan. The city would like to have it considered whether they can pump additional pump the recycled water pumping allocation based on the MOs and MTs established in the groundwater sustainability plans, and would like to have that revisited. Additionally, in the resolution, it's provision 21. There is a termination date. It was from 10 years timeline, and that's rapidly approaching. And the city would like to have the board consider extending that deadline, the termination date of accruing recycled water pumping allocation. So next slide. Conclusions. It's just we need to get timely, complete and timely reporting to final out all the water delivered and evaluate whether surcharges were incurred and how much pumping allocation the city has accrued for all the water delivered. And there is no impact due to pumping of recycled water pumping allocation, as no extraction using recycled water pumping allocation has occurred. Next slide. So the recommendation is to receive a presentation, which I have just presented, and provide direction to staff regarding the City of Oxnard's request to revisit or revise the resolution number 2013-02 and the Recycled Water Management Impact Analysis Plan. And 3, receive and file this report.
Thank you, Kathleen. Any questions or comments from the board before we open it up to the public for comment? Hearing none, then let me ask if Any members of the public have any comments or questions with respect to this item?
Chair Sherry Klima?
Yes.
Chair, I promise this is the last one I'm going to have a comment on.
And that's only because that's the last item on the agenda today, right?
Last item, that's correct. That's correct. I appreciate the board's willingness to hear all of our comments today and everybody's comments, of course. With respect to this item, I really appreciate staff's presentation. It was a great presentation and a good explanation of the situation at hand. We are, city is unsure how it can depend on, this program as a reliable water supply to meet the needs of its residents when we cannot access that water. We haven't been able to realize the benefits of the investment made by the city and its ratepayers with these current restrictions, and that really disincentivizes the city in making additional investments in recycled water. It also makes us kind of have to consider whether going forward we would have to ask all of our ag customers to pay cash, which my understanding, and they can speak better for themselves than I can, but my understanding is they can't afford that. And so this was part of the goal here was to set up a program that works in both directions. It allows Oxnard to pump that water, but it also makes it such that that water is affordable to ag. And if we can't pump that water, then we can't, unfortunately, make it available without some form of payment. And so it will have to go to a cash system, and I suspect that will be really difficult for ag as well. So I just really would like to encourage the board, the staff, that we all kind of put our heads together and think through how we can make the water such that we can pump it. We certainly don't want to over pump. We are obviously very aware of the efforts to ramp down pumping in this basin, but we also need to make this affordable for our, not affordable, but it needs to make sense. It needs to pencil out for our ratepayers who invested in this. And we have a very hard time asking them for further investments in this project if, they're not seeing the payment on what they've already invested. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Any other questions or comments?
Chair Dan Detmer.
Dan, you're still muted. Now you're gone. Oh, there you are.
Got me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Dan Demmer, United Water. I'd just like to comment briefly on this project. United was one of the voices, probably one of the louder voices about the do no harm on these pump back provisions as this program was coming together. We never envisioned we'd be going into an extended drought period like this, and the city wouldn't have the opportunity to realize some of the benefits of this project. So we're open to new discussions. We think it's a shame this project is struggling to be utilized, and we need to put our heads together and figure out how to get that water flowing out of that plant. And, I just got to say, United's sympathetic to the city's situation here. We're still sensitive to the basin condition, but we got to figure this out. And so we're open to that, and we'd like to help with that to the extent we can.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
None seen, Chair.
Then returning.
Actually, we do have one. Henriette Callegas.
Okay.
thank you, Chair West. This is Henry Gromlich with Cayugas Municipal Water District. And I guess I would like to add Cayugas's voice to what Dan and Cherie said. These kinds of projects that involve conjunctive use and development of recycled water are probably going to be a key element helping meet Sigma. And as Cayugas looks to different opportunities in which to work with the GMA, having the ability to be assured that we can invest and have some sort of delivery back is going to be central to that. And, we're sensitive to the fact that the Oxnard Basin operates within certain parameters. And, so we would certainly be supportive of anything that could be done to resolve this, particularly with an eye for the future, for future projects where conjunctive use might be able to both benefit the city and Cayugas's other customers, as well as other basin users. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Anyone else?
None seen.
Thank you. Now, returning to the board, there's nothing specific for us to act on or review. Personally, I have no objection to reviewing the agreement and updating it. 2013 seems both like yesterday and a long time ago. So it depends. I guess context is everything. I would be interested, particularly if we're talking about pumping those allocations, in getting more information on the effect on the basin or the effect on the forebay, if that's where it's to be pumped from. And I'd also be interested in the data that demonstrates that delivery of that recycled water has reduced groundwater pumping by those recipients. I understand that data may not be available now, but that's I understand the value of that recycled water to the city, but the value of that recycled water to the agency is if it reduces groundwater pumping. So I'd be curious to see that information as we start looking at revising this agreement in the future. Okay, any other comments or questions?
I totally agree with your comments, Chair. And certainly keep putting pressure on Pleasant Valley to get their reports done. I mean, they have 2016 done, so they still have a lot of work to do. But apparently, Kathleen, you said they have the data. They just need to get it in the right form and get it to us. So they need to complete that.
Any other comments? If not, this is a receiver. Oops, I'm sorry.
I agree with the comments of everybody about this. You need to take a look, make it work. Thank you.
All right, this is a receive and file. Is there any objection to receiving and filing this report? Hearing none, that'll be the determination of the board. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.